Welcome everyone to one of the famous tourist attractions in Beijing, the Temple of Heaven. The Temple of Heaven, originally named Heaven and Earth Altar, is located on the east side of Yongle Avenue in Dongcheng District, Beijing. It was the place where emperors of the Ming and Qing dynasties offered sacrifices to heaven, prayed for a good harvest and for rain. It's the largest existing ancient sacrificial architectural complex in China. Next, I'll lead you on an immersive tour of each scenic spot in the Temple of Heaven. Now, in front of us is the 7-star stone of the Temple of Heaven. The 7-star stone was set up as a protective stone during the Jiajing period of the Ming Dynasty and has passed more than 470 years up to now. It is said that when the capital of the Ming Dynasty was established in Beijing, Emperor Yongle of the Ming Dynasty intended to find a place for offering sacrifices to heaven. One night he saw the gate of heaven open in his dream and the Big Dipper fall here, so the Temple of Heaven was built here for the ceremony of sacrificing to heaven. In fact, these stones were originally very ordinary. In the 9th year of the Jiajing period of the Ming Dynasty, 1530, a Taoist priest said that this place was too spacious, which was not conducive to the stability of the throne and the emperor's longevity and fortune. So 7 stones were placed here for protection. During the Qing dynasty, another stone was added to the northeast, meaning to remember the ancestral home. Therefore, nominally it is the 7-star stone, but actually it is composed of 8 stones, 7 large and 1 small. Now we come to the long corridor. This long corridor is located on the east side of the Qigu altar and is in the shape of a carpenter's square. It connects the east brick gate of the Qigu altar, the kitchen for sacrifices, and the butchery pavilion. During the Ming and Qing dynasties, the long corridor was specially used as a passage for transporting sacrificial offerings. According to the requirements of ancient rituals, the butchery room had to be more than 200 steps away from the altar. In order to ensure that the offerings were not polluted by rain, snow, wind, or sand, this zigzag long corridor was built. The width of this long corridor is 5 meters, the length is 350 meters, and there are a total of 72 rooms, also known as 72 connected rooms. Its architectural style is very distinctive. There are windows in the front and walls in the back. The eaves and roof ridges are all connected together, and the overall look is very regular and grand. Now we arrive at the North Butchery Pavilion of the Temple of Heaven. In ancient sacrificial places such as altars, temples, and mausoleums, there were all butchery pavilions. This is the place specially used for slaughtering sacrificial livestock such as cattle, sheep, deer, rabbits, pigs, etc., to meet the needs of sacrifices. The North Butchery Pavilion of the Temple of Heaven was first built in the 18th year of Yongle in the Ming Dynasty, 1420. Its architectural style is unique. It is a 5-bay main hall with double-eaved and gable roofs, covered with green glazed tiles, solemn and dignified. There's also a well pavilion in front of the main hall, and the top of this well pavilion is in the style of a luting. Luting is a kind of roof style in traditional ancient Chinese architecture, commonly seen in well pavilions of altars and temples. It is like removing the pointed top part of the pyramidal roof we usually see, and the top is open so that more light can come in, which is convenient for water drawing operations in the well pavilion. Several ancient well pavilions in the Temple of Heaven adopt this luting design, and the stone well here is specially used for drawing water during the sacrifice and butchery. The North Butchery Pavilion and the North Kitchen for Sacrifices are both subsidiary buildings of the Qigu altar of the Temple of Heaven, and both played important roles in the royal Mengchen prayer for a good harvest ceremony of the Ming and Qing dynasties. They are connected to each other through the long corridor on the south and eventually lead to the Hall of Prayer for good harvests. Before slaughtering the livestock, there is an extremely cumbersome etiquette process. First, an incense table needs to be set up, and relevant personnel perform bows and worships. Then, officials specially dispatched by the Honglu Temple come to supervise the slaughtering process. During the slaughtering, the livestock's head will first be hit hard with a large wooden mallet. Because of this place is also called the Slaughtering Pavilion. After the slaughtering is completed and the sacrificial offerings are cleaned up, they will be sent to the kitchen for sacrifices. The livestock used for ancient sacrifices had to be raised in pens before the formal sacrifice, so such livestock was called prison. If the emperor sacrificed to the gods of the land and grains, when all three kinds of livestock, cattle, sheep, and swine, that is, pigs, were available, this was called Tai Lao. This high-standard sacrifice was usually only used by the Son of Heaven in the most important occasions, such as sacrificing to heaven and earth and ancestral temples. And if only sheep and swine were available, it was called Shao Lao, suitable for the sacrificial activities of various levels of nobles, such as vassal princes, dukes, and ministers. Among the three kinds of livestock in ancient times, cattle were the most precious and not qualified for ordinary people to enjoy. Therefore, Tai Lao was sometimes specifically used to refer to cattle, and the best choice for sacrifice was a calf that was about 3 months old. Now we are at the kitchen repository for sacrifices. Look, the left kitchen for sacrifices and the right kitchen for sacrifices here are the places where offerings are prepared before the sacrificial activities. And the repository for sacrifices is where, on the night before the sacrifice to heaven, people would fill all kinds of utensils with offerings, and then the emperor would personally come to inspect. Now, this compound has become a museum with a related theme, and many things that would be used in ancient sacrifices are displayed inside. Through these exhibits, we can have a deeper understanding of the ritual culture in ancient China. According to the mausoleum regulations during the Ming and Qing dynasties, the kitchen repository for sacrifices was specially set up for making and storing offerings during sacrifices, such as the Temple of Heaven, the altar of land and grain, and the Imperial Ancestral Temple in Beijing. All these places have kitchens and repositories for sacrifices. Here there are the left and right kitchens for sacrifices, which are actually kitchens for making offerings, each with 5 bays in width. There are also the north and south repositories for sacrifices, which are warehouses for storing items. Besides, there is a butchery pavilion, which is the place for slaughtering livestock such as cattle and sheep, while pavilions were also built outside the surrounding wall. Now we arrive at the Hall of Imperial Heaven in Beijing's Temple of Heaven. The Hall of Imperial Heaven is an extremely important building in the Qigu altar architectural complex. It was first built in the 18th year of Yongle in the Ming Dynasty and was initially called the Bedroom of the Heaven and Earth Altar. It wasn't renamed the Hall of Imperial Heaven until the Jiajing period and has kept this name till now. This hall is located to the north of the Hall of Prayer for good harvests. Its architectural style is hip-roofed, and the blue glazed tiles shine with a unique luster in the sunlight. Its main function is to enshrine the spirit tablets of Imperial Heaven God and the ancestors of the emperors. Right now, the plaque right in front of us reads Imperial Heaven God. In ancient sacrificial ceremonies, this place was like a sacred spiritual refuge. Before every grand ceremony of praying for a good harvest, numerous complex and solemn preparatory works would all revolve around the Hall of Imperial Heaven. The clergy would carefully tidy up and arrange the spirit tablets inside the hall to ensure the smooth progress of the sacrificial ceremony, in order to express respect and the heart of praying for blessings to heaven and ancestors. Now, right before our eyes is the Hall of Prayer for Good Harvests. Its predecessor was the Great Sacrifice Hall, and it's the core building of the Temple of Heaven in Beijing. It's also called the Hall of Prayer for a Bumper Harvest. Emperors of the Ming and Qing dynasties prayed for a good harvest here in the early spring. This hall is truly resplendent and magnificent. The gilded roof glitters, the blue tiles and red pillars are particularly imposing. It's a 3-story, double-eaved circular hall with colorful paintings. It has a structure of a hall on top and a house below, built on a 3-story white marble circular platform. This platform is surrounded by white stone-carved railings. The entire hall covers an area of 460 square meters, and this platform is the Kigu altar. The interior of the Hall of Prayer for Good Harvest is very distinctive. There are no main beams or long purlins. The eaves and roof are supported by columns and beams. There are 28 large Nanmu columns arranged in a circular pattern. The 4 central Longjing columns, 19.2 meters high and 1.2 meters in diameter, represent the 4 seasons. The 12 columns in the middle represent the 12 months. The 12 eaves columns on the periphery represent the 12 two-hour periods of the day. The 3 layers of eaves correspond to the 3 layers of ceilings. There's also a dragon and phoenix caisson in the middle, and the beams and purlins are painted with dragon and phoenix patterns. On the northern side inside the hall, there is a carved dragon throne on a circular stone platform. There are also thrones on the stone platforms on the east and west sides, with wooden relief screens behind them, respectively placing the spirit tablets of God and the ancestors of the emperor. The Hall of Prayer for Good Harvests has a magnificent and awe-inspiring appearance, with a soaring momentum and a perfect combination of movement and stillness. The triple-eaved, pointed top with a precious roof, the 3-layer white marble stone altar, the large columns standing in circles inside the hall, the caisson, and the surrounding child columns are all circular. The triple eaves and triple bases represent 3 steps of heaven, indicating a close connection between heaven and man. All the circular structures express the ancients' thought of reaching heaven and the notion of revering heaven and worshipping gods, presenting the repetitive view of time and space with the beauty of circularity. In the agricultural age, the ancients were filled with reverence for heaven, and the Hall of Prayer for Good Harvests was a sacred carrier connecting heaven and humans. The emperor would hold a grand sacrificial ceremony here to pray for a bumper harvest, favorable weather, and peace and prosperity for the country. This is called the harmony between heaven and humans. Ancient sacrifices carried political significance. As the altar for the emperor to offer sacrifices to heaven and pray for a good harvest, the Hall of Prayer for Good Harvests held an extremely high political status. Its blue glazed tiles, dragon and phoenix patterns, and the form of the circular triple-eaved roof were all meticulously designed, highlighting the lofty grade, embodying respect for heaven, the authority of heaven, and the emperors receiving the mandate of heaven, proving the legitimacy of the rule. Sacrificing to heaven and praying for a good harvest also reflected the ancient monarchs' thought of valuing agriculture. After all, agriculture was of vital importance to the stability of the country. The Hall of Prayer for Good Harvests was a symbol of this thought of valuing agriculture, embodying the emperor's power, and carrying people's expectations for a better life. Now we are standing on the Dambi Bridge of the Temple of Heaven. This Dambi Bridge is 360 meters long. It's like a huge dragon, towering high above the ground, being 4 meters higher than the ground, connecting the circular mound altar and the Hall of Prayer for Good Harvests. Look at the middle of this thoroughfare. There are east-west passageways with arches below. Because of this, it's called a bridge. It's the oldest overpass in the ancient capital, Beijing. Take a look at this bridge deck. It's very spacious, being 30 meters wide. The paved road in the middle, made of stone slabs, is the spiritual road, which is specially for the Emperor of Heaven. Ordinary people are not allowed to step on it. The brick-paved road on the east is called the Imperial Road, which is a dedicated passage for the Emperor. And the princes and ministers who accompany the sacrifice can only walk on the Royal Road on the west. Look, the hierarchy is clearly defined for going up and down. There must be no confusion at all. There's another interesting feature. This Dambi Bridge is higher in the north and lower in the south. If you walk towards the north, it feels like climbing step by step to a higher place, as if you are about to enter the heavenly court. Isn't it quite a special feeling? Now we come to the Imperial Vault of Heaven. It was originally called the Temple of Supreme Heaven and was the main hall of the Vault of Heaven in the circular mound altar of the Temple of Heaven. The Imperial Vault of Heaven is inside the Echo Wall of the Temple of Heaven Park. It is a circular courtyard as a whole. Right in the middle of the courtyard is the circular hall of the Imperial Vault of Heaven, and there is a 5-bay side hall on each of the east and west sides. The outermost part is surrounded by a circular courtyard wall, which is the famous Echo Wall. The doors and the courtyard are all named after the name of the hall. The Imperial Vault of Heaven was first built in the 9th year of the Jiajing period of the Ming Dynasty. In the 17th year of the Jiajing period, it was renamed the Imperial Vault of Heaven. At first, it was a double-eaved circular building. Later, in the 17th year of the Qianlong period of the Qing Dynasty, it was rebuilt into the single-eaved style we see now. Look at the hall of the Imperial Vault of Heaven. It is circular and faces south. Below is a circular zumizuo, a base for a building that is 2.85 meters high. On top of it is a single-eaved pointed roof with blue glazed tubular tiles and gilded treasures. It's very imposing. This circular zumizuo is built with bluestone and white stone and is surrounded by stone railings. There are steps on the east, south, and west sides. On the steps on the south side, there is a Dambi stone with 2 dragons playing with a pearl. The 3 characters Imperial Vault of Heaven have particular meanings. The character Imperial means supreme. Vault represents heaven. Heaven refers to both the universe and a house. Therefore, people also call the Imperial Vault of Heaven the Heavenly Vault. This is usually the place where the spirit tablets for sacrifices at the circular mound altar are stored. Inside the hall, there is a circular stone platform on the front, which is for placing the spirit tablet of Imperial Heaven God. On both sides in front of the stone platform are 4 square stone platforms each, which are for placing the spirit tablets of the 8 ancestors of the Qing Dynasty. Speaking of the surrounding wall of the Imperial Vault of Heaven, that is, the Echo Wall, its sound transmission effect is very magical. Previously, everyone was very puzzled and there was no way to explain it scientifically. It wasn't until 1953 that Professor Tang Dingyuan tested the acoustic effect of the building of the Imperial Vault of Heaven and discovered that because the surrounding wall was built very closely and the surface was particularly smooth, the sound waves were not absorbed by the wall and were reflected back, which produced the echo and formed such a unique acoustic phenomenon. This was also the first scientific explanation for the echo phenomenon of these buildings in the Temple of Heaven in history. Now, the place where we are is the circular Mound altar. This is a 3-story open-air circular platform built during the Jiajing period of the Ming Dynasty and is a sacred place, where the emperor held the grand ceremony of sacrificing to heaven on the winter solstice. Look at this circular Mound altar. It is a 3-story open-air circular platform carefully carved from stones. The altar surface is made of blue-gray slate, and the white marble balustrades and columns are exquisitely carved. It also has 2 enclosures. The outer one is square, and the inner one is circular, which symbolizes round heaven and square earth. Since this is the altar for sacrificing to heaven, a lot of mathematical knowledge is ingeniously used in the entire structure of the circular Mound altar. Take a look at the stone components of the altar surface, steps, and railings. Their numbers are either 9 or multiples of 9. In the concept of the ancients, 9 was a yang number and was specially used to symbolize heaven. Just take the upper platform surface of the circular Mound altar. There are 9 circles of platform stones built around it. The central circular stone slab is called the Heart of Heaven stone. The first circle outside it is paved with 9 stone slabs, and the next circle is 18, and then it increases by 9 in sequence until the outermost circle has 81, which implies 9 layers of heaven. There is also a very magical thing. If you stand on the Heart of Heaven stone and speak, you will find that the sound is particularly deep and resonant, as if you can talk to heaven. Now we come to the Abstinence Palace of the Temple of Heaven. This Abstinence Palace is where the emperor fasted. Among all kinds of sacrificial buildings of the royal family, there would be an Abstinence Palace, and the most complete existing Abstinence Palace building is right here in our Beijing Temple of Heaven. The Abstinence Palace is located in the northwest outside the Tianzhen Gate of the circular Mound altar of the Temple of Heaven. Its layout is very distinctive, with a square plane facing east. For the emperors of the Ming and Qing dynasties, there were clear requirements according to the regulations. 3 days before each sacrifice to heaven, they had to live alone in this palace for 3 days and 3 nights. During this period, there were many taboos. They couldn't eat meat, fish, scallions, garlic, couldn't drink alcohol, weren't allowed any entertainment activities, couldn't handle judicial matters, couldn't offer condolences or hold memorial ceremonies, couldn't get close to women, and had to take more baths. This is called fasting. You might wonder, usually the emperor's bedroom is paved with yellow glazed tiles, but this Abstinence Palace is paved with blue glazed tiles and has a layout facing east. Why is that? Because feudal emperors all regarded themselves as the sons of heaven who received the mandate of heaven, that is, the sons of the emperor of heaven. Since they wanted to sincerely sacrifice to heaven and be a filial son, they naturally couldn't call themselves emperors in front of their father, nor could they live in the main hall with yellow tiles. This is the origin of the layout of the Abstinence Palace and the color of the glazed tiles. The grand ceremony of sacrificing to heaven officially begins at dawn on the winter solstice. It is said that on this night of the winter solstice, the yang qi begins to gradually strengthen, and the yang qi can make all things multiply and grow. When the ceremony begins at dawn, lamp posts will be erected inside the circular Mound altar with big lanterns hanging on them. This is called the heavenly lantern, and suddenly the entire altar is brightly lit. The emperor would come by carriage from the Abstinence Palace to the large curtains set up in advance. change his sacrificial clothes first, take off his shoes, and then ascend the altar to perform the rituals. Now, right before our eyes is the Beamless Hall. It's the main hall of the Abstinence Palace and was built as early as the 18th year of Yongle in the Ming Dynasty. Why is it called the Beamless Hall? Because it relies on brick arches for load-bearing instead of beams and purlins. Isn't it amazing? When the emperor entered or exited the Abstinence Palace, related ceremonies were all held here. Now, the interior of the hall is displayed as it was during the Qianlong period. Look at that horizontal tablet, respectfully follow the vast heaven. It was written by Emperor Qianlong himself. The small pavilion in front of the Beamless Hall is the bronze figure pavilion. This pavilion has stone columns and is made of bricks on top. It's a tall, narrow, but very exquisite pavilion. It's 5.5 meters high and 2 meters in side length. Every time before the sacrifice, during the emperor's fasting period, a bronze figure would be placed on the table inside the pavilion. This bronze figure is 1.5 feet tall and holds a sign in its hand with the words "fasting" written on it. This is to remind the emperor at all times to fast sincerely and not be sloppy at all. The pavilion we are seeing now is named the Double Ring Pavilion, also known as the Double Ring Longevity Pavilion. It was originally located in Zhongnanai. It was a longevity pavilion specially built by Emperor Qianlong when he celebrated his mother's 50th birthday. In the late 1970s, as there was construction work to be carried out in Zhongnanai, some old buildings had to be demolished. At that time, Premier Zhou Enlai even went to conduct on-site inspections in person and gave the instruction that try not to move the buildings if possible, and those that must be moved can be relocated to parks. As for the Double Ring Pavilion, when Premier Zhou was seriously ill in 1975, he specifically approved that the Double Ring Pavilion can be relocated to the Temple of Heaven so that the people can all see it. Therefore, in 1976, the Double Ring Longevity Pavilion, together with the Fangsheng Pavilion, the fan-shaped pavilion, and the covered corridors, were moved from Zhongnanai to our Temple of Heaven Park. Originally, there were 2 plaques on the pavilion, namely Wind Pavilion and Moon Pavilion, and Orchid Garden and Pearl Spring, which were both written by Emperor Guangxu of the Qing Dynasty. Since many crabapple trees were planted around the pavilion, it also had the nice name of Crabapple Pavilion. Unfortunately, when it was moved out of Zhongnanai, the 2 plaques were lost and their whereabouts remain unknown. The Double Ring Longevity Pavilion that we can see now has a unique and rigorous structure, and it looks dignified and well-proportioned. Both of the circular pavilions have double-eaved roofs covered with peacock blue glazed tiles with yellow tile edges. The dugong brackets are also quite elaborate. The upper eaves are equipped with single overhanging 3-step gilt dugong, and the lower eaves have double overhanging 5-step gilt dugong. This is a typical architectural style of imperial gardens. Each pavilion has 8 eaves columns. There are benches connected between the eaves columns. In the north-south direction, there are also rui-shaped steps for people to enter and exit conveniently. Let's take a look at the painted patterns on the beams and lintels in the pavilion. They are painted with gold-threaded Suzhou-style painted patterns depicting flowers and birds, landscapes, figures, buildings, and so on, which match the surrounding scenery very well and look extremely beautiful. Our Double Ring Longevity Pavilion has a beautiful meaning, symbolizing harmony, auspiciousness, and longevity. Moreover, in those painted patterns on the beams and lintels, the peony flowers represent wealth and honor, the narcissus flowers are like water fairies, the morning glories reflect the diligence and housekeeping of ancient women. There are also numerous patterns with beautiful meanings such as magpie on the plum tree, indicating good news, wealth and longevity, and pine and crane for longevity. They are all related to birthday celebrations, happy events, and auspicious occasions, fully demonstrating traditional Chinese culture. When you are tired from walking, you can just take a rest here and enjoy the winding corridors, the green grass and trees, as well as the exquisite pavilions around. The scenery is really wonderful.